Okay, so now let's go on. You should be able to kind of understand and use these in sentences and discuss them. I think if you look here, describe different ecological communities in the oceans. Remember, there was a whole bunch of communities in the last movie that I made, and you should be able to say both the advantages and disadvantages, or what are some of the challenges, but then tell me in each community who's the primary producer, who's the consumer, who's the secondary consumer, and tell me who they are in each system. So here you've got a food pyramid with the primary producers that are usually the plants, and an example of a primary producer would be a diatom that's a kind of a plankton, a plant plankton, a phytoplankton, or a dinoflagellate, or other primary producers could be kelp is another primary producer, depending if you're in a kelp forest. Another primary producer could be a chemosynthetic bacteria if you're at a deep sea vent. So primary producers, the bottom of the food chain, they're the autotrophs. Then you've got your herbivores, right, that eat the plants. So snails, some herbivorous fish, the little shrimp that feed on the diatoms, the shrimp zooplankton, or the ctenophores, coral, anything that eats phytoplankton, or anything that eats plants. Those sea urchins go around and they graze on kelp, right? So those are your second trophic level, your herbivorous consumers. Then you've got your first level carnivores, right? So these are the creatures who eat the herbivore. So a fish that eats a snail, or a fish that eats zooplankton, a fish that eats shrimp, a seal that eats shrimp, a bird that eats shrimp, okay? You can see where I'm going? And then you get your second level, third level, and your top carnivore, your carnivores, your sharks, your predatory birds, your, I'm going to have to get the cat. Hold on. All right, he didn't feel like saying hi. And then you'll notice here that this is 10% up, and you see that there's a lot more plankton there, and there are people who eat plankton. Here you've got your decomposing bacteria bringing nutrients and recycling it back into the system. Okay, here you see the feeding efficiency and some examples also to know who they are. I'm just looking back over here at your study guide. You're supposed to be able to give examples. What is a phytoplankton? Give me an example. We've got holoplankton and meroplankton also, and I don't know if I have a slide of that, but some creatures are plankton their whole life, right? Diatoms, krill, jellyfish, ctenophores, bad swimmers, their whole life. They stay in the plankton their whole life. Other creatures are meroplankton, and they're only plankton part of their life. Eggs, like a fish egg, tuna eggs, are plankton for part of their life, right? Other creatures, remember I said the sperm and the eggs go up into the water column and they meet, and they're larvae floating around for a while before they become a baby lobster and grow up into a big lobster that lives on the bottom of the sea floor. So meroplankton would be a juvenile, a baby. They're only plankton for part of their life, and you need to give examples of that. Microplankton are tiny and microscopic, and macroplankton are big enough for the eye to see. So microscopic plankton, again, the dinoflagellates and the diatoms, you needed a microscope to see them. Macroplankton, jellyfish, shrimp, you can see them with the naked eye. You're supposed to be able to explain photosynthesis and chemosynthesis. I gave that 2 times to you, one in an online lecture and one in a live lecture, so you should have that. You should also be able to talk about respiration, so I wanted you to know the chemical formula as well as be able to say it in words and say what it is. Autotroph, self-feeder, heterotroph, has to eat others. Diatoms and dinoflagellates we've mentioned. Let's talk about the oxygen minimum zone. It's in this blue line. So here you've got the euphotic zone where photosynthesis is happening at the surface, and all the plants are at the surface. And as you know, that plants, when they photosynthesize, give off oxygen, right? But check it out. All the animals that like to eat plants, the herbivores, are living right near the plants, and they are doing respiration and taking up the oxygen. So the place where a lot of animals are, that's kind of a limiting factor. They're crowding each other here and breathing up all the oxygen. It's called the oxygen minimum zone. I just wanted to go back up here and talk about feeding efficiency. You see it takes 10,000 phytoplankton, plant plankton, to make 1,000 zooplankton, to make 100 small fish, to make 10 medium fish, to make 1 orca. Okay, so you see how only 10% goes up the food chain to the next one in line, to the next one up the trophic level. And here you've got more examples, right? So this would be kind of an open ocean community where you've got phytoplankton being eaten by zooplankton, being eaten by anchovies, being eaten by a medium-sized fish, which is a bonito, which is a kind of a tuna, and then an orca at the top of the food chain. So this would be your top carnivore, your secondary carnivore, your first level carnivore, your herbivore, and here's your autotrophic plankton. So there's some examples, and you should be able to use these in sentences and give me lots of examples. So here's your trophic pyramid, your food web. You should be able to understand the relationship and feeding efficiency. Let's talk about where is productivity high? So remember, productivity has to do with a balance of nutrients and sunlight. You'd imagine that since sunlight is the most important thing, that in the tropics you'd have a lot of productivity. But if you see in the tropics, yes, sunlight all year round, but low nutrients all year round. So you get this just low level of productivity in the tropics. Here in the poles, you've got dark in the winter, but then as soon as the sun comes out, it's light all summer long, and because there's high nutrients, you get this big spike in the summer in the poles, right? And then the temperate is kind of in the middle. It's dark in the winter, but not totally black, right? Like in the poles. And then you've got nutrients kind of in the winter, and then your sun comes out and you get a plankton bloom. And then as the nutrients get diminished all summer long, they're still light, but lower nutrients, so it goes down in the summer. And then in the fall, when the first storm comes, brings the nutrients back to the surface again, but there's not enough light, so it goes back down again. So you get the most productivity kind of in the in the temperate regions, near the coasts where there's a lot of nutrients, and you also get high productivity in the poles. Okay, only in the summer though. So where's the productivity greatest? The physical factors we've already discussed. Know the important kinds of plankton. Know about California giant kelp. We talked about that a lot. You should be able to describe food chains, primary producers or autotrophs, these photosynthesizers that produce their own food. Kind of giving you good examples here. I've already talked about all this stuff. Consumers, heterotrophs cannot make their own food. They have to consume primary producers. Krill is a good example. So I'm kind of giving you all kinds of information here. And then let us go down. Here's another kind of lots of little examples here. Your photosynthetic diatoms and dinoflagellates, the bottom of the food chain. Your second level is your zooplankton, your little shrimps and your copepods that feed off the diatoms and dinoflagellates, and then your kind of medium small creatures, and then you've got your small fish, your medium fish, and your larger fish. So you're an example of a food web or feeding strategy, and you should be able to discuss these things. Okay? And then, again, I'm not going to give this whole animal lecture again in class, but you should be able to give examples of these creatures and say where they live. So a sponge is a simple animal. It's benthic. It's sessile. It's a filter feeder. It lives on the seafloor. I'm giving you kind of some examples. You can go back, look through your notes, look at your book. Certainly you can surf for videos online. For all the different kinds of creatures that we talked about. Where do they live? What do they do? Who eats them? What do they eat? Where are they in the food chain, right? So I'm not asking you to sort of memorize everything we talked about, but you should be able to give, a couple examples of benthic creatures, a couple examples of pelagic creatures, a couple of examples of autotrophs, a couple of examples of heterotrophs, and say kind of where they do and where do they eat, where do they live, that kind of thing. So here's another example of a sessile benthic heterotroph that filter feeds on plankton. And here's some worms that crawl around and graze. These are vagrant benthic creatures. What do they do? Where do they live? Who eats what? Here's some mollusks. You can see these guys crawl around on the seafloor. Here's one that's sessile. a clam. These are snails. This guy's a detritivore. He eats dead stuff. Okay? So I'm not going to redo the Marine Communities lecture because you should just, if you didn't understand it, please watch it again. But just go over the essay questions. 2 important biological and 2 important physical limiting factors. List them and discuss them. Say why they're important. You can pick any 2. And you're supposed to pick 2 of the communities that I lectured on communities. That was the last talk, marine communities. So we had deep sea communities. We had hydrothermal vent communities. We had kelp communities, sand grain communities, intertidal communities, abyssal communities. Can't remember them all, but I mean, that was probably a lot of them. And you should be able to describe what are the challenges, what are the advantages to living here, who eats who. Give me some names of organisms that live in each community and what are their feeding strategies and what do they do to survive, okay? So this is your review, the end of your review video. I'm going to remind you of a couple of other things. One is if you have questions, you may come early to class. I'll be there at 11:30 in the stock room or in the room next door, meeting and having a study group. And I filmed my video this weekend. And I expect that those of you who will be completing the extra credit will be doing a video for me also. So please get that to me as soon as you can. You could burn a disk. You could bring your computer in. You could bring it on a flash drive. You could load it up to YouTube, and I can get it off that. So whatever you need to do to get me that video would be good. So see you no, not tomorrow. I will see you Wednesday. Okay, bye.